got a few questions here about science. So the first is, why do science and religion contradict? And the second one is this, please answer this, exclamation mark. At school, we were looking at the evidence for Christianity in science. There was so much more evidence for scientific beliefs, and the evidence for Christianity wasn't even 100% true. How can we believe when there is no hardcore evidence and when there is so much evidence for science, which people at school are so sure of? Please help. Thank you. Great question.
Yeah.
Long text as well. I wonder who your service provider is.
And I will do my best to answer that, but I'll deal with the first one first. Yeah, great to see everyone here. So this question, why do science and religion contradict, was a question that I myself asked. I grew up in a neutral home and arrived at university ready to do a biochemistry degree, and saw there was an event called Guerrilla Christian on the first night, so I went along to this. And I came armed with my question, how can you be a scientist and believe in God at the same time? And I was given the answer that science is answering the how questions and religion the why questions. Now, it's deeper than that. There's more that you can say, but this was quite literally rocket science for me at that moment. And it was the beginning of a journey, and I gave my life to Christ halfway through this biochemistry degree, meanwhile continuing to go back into biochem lectures and be a scientist in that context. And this idea that science and faith are in conflict actually has its roots in history. And there's a lot of things that we believe today that have a root that goes back, and it's important that we know where that comes from. This comes from a historical situation in Victorian Britain where the professional scientists were trying to distance themselves from clergymen that had taken on a practice called natural theology. So by studying the natural world, you can appreciate God's goodness, which you indeed can, and that is something that we definitely want to uphold. But the professional scientists at that time wanted to distance themselves from this other group, and during that time of distancing, ideas like conflict and warfare were thrown about. And it is from that root that we have this misunderstanding that science and faith are in conflict. Just because professional scientists and the church were in conflict at one time in history does not mean that science and the Christian faith are in conflict today. In fact, prior to that, the belief in God fueled much of the explosion of modern science in the modern realm. Amy already gave the list of scientists who were theists, who made significant contributions to their field. And the basis for their science was this. There was an ordered world had been created with laws and trends that you can investigate. If you do an experiment here in London and you go and repeat it back in Oxford or Liverpool or wherever, if you have similar conditions, you should get similar results. There is something repeatable about the world. And secondly, human beings have minds that can make sense of this order. And both of those find their origin in that there is order in nature and in the human mind, because there is an orderer behind it. And therefore, I would love to say to you that God is not only anti-science, but he is in some way the very being that makes it possible, because how else do you account for rationality? If we are just atoms, purely atoms, as the new atheists would have it, then how do you account for the fact that we think rationally? Why should we believe anything, as Professor Haldane puts it, why should I believe anything my brain tells me, including that it is just made of atoms? How do you account for rationality as a result of an irrational, blind, unguided process? And so the battle is not really between science and faith, it's between the major worldviews of atheism and theism. Atheism, which says matter has eternally existed and mind has come from that. And theism, which says mind has eternally existed, in the beginning God, and matter has emerged from mind. And we would say that there is actually a much stronger case that undergirds science, that there is order in nature and in our minds because there is an orderer behind it. So that would be the science and religion beginnings of an answer to that. Please do come and talk to me some more. In terms of the other question, in terms of looking at the evidence for science and Christianity, one of the things that people often say is that science is kind of rational and evidential, and faith is this sort of woolly thing that is asking you to throw your brain out of the window and take a blind leap of faith into the dark. Well, I'm sure Michael would explain much more eloquently than me that faith, whether you apply it to religious faith or in daily life, is always precisely on the existence of the evidence available. Let me take the example of surgery. If you're about to go in for surgery and you hear that your surgeon has a great reputation and he's been doing this operation for many, many years, what is the level of your faith in him or her for that operation? Well, it is high. Why? Because the evidence suggests that you have a good right to have that level of faith. If, however, you get there and they say, oh, sorry, NHS cuts, and we're giving you someone that's been, just got their degree as a junior doctor a couple of weeks ago, do you mind? What would your level of faith be then? Well, it would be much lower. Why? Because of the evidence available. Faith is always exercised precisely on the basis of the evidence. Let me give you another example. The bus system in this country. When I'm waiting for a bus, do I have a high level of faith that I will arrive on time? Not really. Why? Because of the evidence. They don't run on time. And the people put their faith in the person of Jesus Christ for exactly the same reasons. There's an account in Luke's Gospel of a woman who's been bleeding for 12 years, and she reaches out and touches Jesus' cloak, and he turns around and says, daughter, your faith has healed you. Now, faith in what? Faith in who? Do we think that she had just seen Jesus that day and just decided to take a blind leap of faith in the dark? Or had she seen him operating and seen his character, seen his integrity, and decided that he, on the basis of the evidence, was worth her giving it a shot, reaching out, touching his cloak, and having her life changed and turned around? Equally, the other types of evidence for Christianity, the God that we know does not ask you to take a blind leap of faith into the dark. And if any of you are feeling like you're in that situation, can I just highlight that there is a huge body of evidence that by God in his grace has given us. Firstly, Amy has already unpacked the manuscript evidence, that if you want to throw that out, you have to throw out most of the other historical documents of our age. Secondly, archaeological evidence. If you want to build anything in Jerusalem and Israel today, you have to dig down first to uncover any potential archaeological sites. Thirdly, the evidence of daily life, that as you have shared your stories with each other, that is a form of experiential evidence. And fourthly, the evidence that inspired those natural scientists back in the scientific revolution time, the natural evidence, the evidence of the world around us. Psalm 19 verse 1 says, the heavens declare the glory of God, the skies proclaim the work of his hands. And therefore God does not ask us to take this blind leap of faith into the dark. There's lots we could also say about science, this idea that it's unchanging, totally conclusive. The media gives that impression when a new scientific discovery comes out. In reality, the day-to-day is slight tweaking of existing theories and gradually reaching a conclusion. You get evidence from different fields that over a number of years can lead to a very strong theory. But on a day-to-day basis, it's not this that science is absolutely conclusive and unchanging. That's just not how it operates.
Thank you, Sharon.